Hello folks, it's me, DeMontropolis, and here I am with the definitive boss guide to Mega Man 2 at long last. With the previous boss guide becoming a huge hit for my channel, as in it's my most popular video yet, following it up was inevitable. Here, I'll be discussing all of Mega Man 2's bosses in great detail for both newcomers and veterans. And given this is Mega Man 2, all my analysis will be based on difficult mode, which is the definitive way to play the game. With that said, let's jump right in! DWN-9, Metal Man. 6 damage contact, 3 damage on Metal Blade. Metal Man's room has a conveyor belt for a floor that will always travel in one direction. Every 6 seconds or so, the screen briefly flashes to indicate the conveyor belt switching directions. The conveyor belt will not be present during the rematch, making the fight a lot easier as a result. As for Metal Man, he always stays on one side, running in place. When the player shoots, Metal Man jumps up to one of 3 heights. On the way down, he will throw 1 to 3 metal blades in rapid succession at the player, depending on which height he jumps. He can also attack on his own if the player waits too long. If the player gets too close to Metal Man, he will leap to the other side of the room to gain distance, throwing a metal blade at the peak of his jump. The player can either choose to fight him from afar or up close, the latter strategy making Metal Man continuously jump back and forth along the arena, though each method requires a lot of metal blade dodging. Buster only. The metal blades themselves are pretty easy to dodge, so long as you don't spam him, as they are always aimed at you. You can jump over 2 metal blades at once, and the third one should fly over your head mid-jump. My favorite way to fight Metal Man is to blend the strategies of fighting afar and up close, and it depends on which direction the conveyor belt is moving. If the conveyor belt is pulling me away from Metal Man, I fight afar, as my offense can be controlled and maximized easily. When attacking, I fire my first shot at the apex of my jump, so if Metal Man does a medium jump, he will get hit. My follow-up from this depends on what jump he does next. If he jumps low, I can sneak in 1 shot at ground level, and on his way down from the medium and high jumps, I can fire 2 shots at ground level. Due to the game's short iframes, which is key info going forward with this game, Metal Man will get hit by both shots. If done correctly, you should be hitting him once if he goes low, twice if he goes high, and thrice if he goes medium. However, always keep in mind the general timer of the conveyor belt, because a direction switch can screw up your positioning while dodging metal blades. If the conveyor belt is pushing me towards Metal Man, I race towards him to make him retreat to the other side, which returns the conveyor belt advantage to me. I also take this opportunity to fire 2 shots at ground level, just like with before. Weapons. Metal Man's biggest weakness is ironically the metal blade itself, doing 14 damage. However, as the player cannot revisit stages, this weapon can only be used in the rematch. So, if Metal Blade is not available, Quick Boomerang is his standard weakness, doing 4 damage. The weapon's auto-fire nature also works against Metal Man's pattern, as the button can simply be held down to damage Metal Man when he's running in place, given he only jumps straight up if the attack button is pressed, not held. Lastly, a fully charged Atomic Fire deals 4 damage, though this alone won't be enough. DWN-10, Airman. 8 damage on contact, 4 damage on air shooter. Airman has a simple pattern. He will use this air shooter to create a whole formation of tornadoes that fill up the screen, 6 at a time, which block shots. After a second of these tornadoes staying in place, Airman will blow the tornadoes away, and the player away at a gradually increasing speed. He will set up 3 tornado formations before he jumps 2 times to the other side, with the second jump being higher. Once he reaches the other side, he will then repeat his pattern of 3 air shooter formations. It should be noted that 2 of his tornado formations are frame perfect or near impossible to dodge. One strategy is to stay at the corner that Airman jumps to, as he always stands just ahead of the corner, damage him behind his back as much as you can, then use Airman's wind blowing to jump over him and return to being in front of his face. Buster only. Thanks to those 2 frame-perfect patterns, expect to take damage against Airman. So if you're low on health and don't have an E-tank, grind off the Pippy Birds just before the boss gate until you have at least half of your health, which is 14 bars. Thankfully, Airman takes 2 damage from the Buster, So anytime you throw something unfair, tank the hit and blitz him before he sends out his next formation. Occasionally, he may not use those patterns and you'll have a pretty smooth time, but don't count on it. For the 4 normal patterns, there will always be one tornado at ground level. You can clear this tornado by jumping over it, but observe the other tornadoes around you so you don't bonk your head against them. Depending on the formation, you can use the wind blowing to your advantage with dodging. While you can normally hit Airman after you pass through or tank through the tornadoes, you can also fire shots just above the ground tornado to get some chip damage. As Airman does not turn around to face you after switching sides, always stay at the corner when he jumps, and you can hit him 5 times thanks to the short iframes. After the 5th shot, use the wind blowing to get back in front of him. The gradual acceleration of the wind blowing makes it pretty forgiving to get out of the corner. Weapons. Airman's weakness is Leaf Shield, which does 8 damage. However, the tornadoes will still block the attack to prevent an easy cheesy victory, so you have to find openings to throw the shield at Airman. Wait until all tornadoes on Leaf Shield's level are far behind you before you throw a shield, so it doesn't get blocked. Airman is very vulnerable as he's jumping, thanks to Leaf Shield aiming up, and by the time it gets to a corner, you could just mash shoot to win. Outside of Leaf Shield, he takes 2 damage from Quick Boomerang, and Atomic Fire if at least half charged, which does 6 damage, and the half charge variant is enough to take him down, actually. DWN 11, Bubble Man. 4 damage on contact, 2 damage on shots, 4 damage on Bubble Lead. Bubble Man's room is underwater and has spikes layered on the ceiling, which prevent you from doing a full jump. Bubble Man starts his pattern by firing 1 to 3 bouncing bubble leads from his head gun. They bounce high enough that the player has to stand underneath the arcs so they bounce over Mega Man. Once he shoots the last bubble lead, he will start swimming diagonally to a height above Mega Man, and then float back down to the ground. If he catches Mega Man in his crosshairs, he will rapid fire small projectiles forward, which can be hard to dodge. He resets his pattern once Mega Man lands on the ground after Bubble Man has done so, who will wait for the player in the meantime. Due to how his bubble leads are first shot at an arc, there is a flaw in his pattern where you can stand right next to him as he shoots bubble lead to avoid the bubble leads, making the fight much easier. The rematch arena does not have spikes on the ceiling, removing any full jump restrictions. Buster only. The first part of the fight is the trickiest in dodging, as you start far away from Bubble Man. This distance actually does matter when fighting Bubble Man, because if you are far away from him, he will fire shots at ground level, and it becomes tricky to slip through them. When the fight begins, do a high jump to set yourself up for slipping past his shots, but make sure not to bonk your head on the spikes. After this first volley of attacks, he becomes much easier. Standing right next to him as he fires Bubble Lead is a great position, as they just fly over your head, though you can also position yourself within a medium distance. Either of these work, as Bubble Man will not fire shots at ground level if you are within this proximity distance, so you won't even have to jump super high like in the beginning. As Bubble Man floats down, you do want to jump past his level as he will try to shoot you, but if you're feeling daring, you could sneak in extra shots as he's floating down. Just be careful not to jump too high and get in his crosshairs. Weapons. Bubble Man's weakness is Metal Blade, which not only does 4 damage, but also lets the player aim at Bubble Man when he is higher up, removing the stress of having to jump very high. Bubble Man also takes 2 damage from Quick Boomerang and Crash Bomb. While Quick Boomerang is easier to use, Crash Bomb should be shot at the wall so the explosions can rack up multiple hits against Bubble Man. It should also be noted that using Bubble Lead against Bubble Man will actually heal his entire life gauge. DWN 12, Quickman. 4 damage on contact, 4 damage on Quick Boomerang. Quickman is easily the most difficult Robot Master to fight, no matter what weapon you're fighting him with. His arena has 3 elevations, shaped like a hill but with a gap in the middle. Quickman's pattern is to jump 3 times and then run at the player before jumping again. His jumps are either a high jump to land on Mega Man, a medium jump to land ahead of Mega Man, or a short jump to get close to Mega Man. On the second jump, he will throw 3 Quick Boomerangs. These will either all clump up together or spread out. They are aimed in Mega Man's general direction, and once they miss, they will stop and re-aim themselves at Mega Man's new position. It should be noted that his fight is actually bugged. Quickman will glitch inside the farthest walls of the arena. You can even see his feet clip inside the floor very briefly, which eats up his jumps and incidentally shifts his pattern order, thus making it seem like he is random. The rematch room is completely flat, making the fight somewhat easier. Buster only. Quickman takes 2 damage from the Buster, and using this knowledge you want to end the fight as quickly as possible by shooting him at every opportunity, so there's no excuse thanks to the short iframes. As with Airman, you should have an E-tank on you just in case, and thankfully there is one earlier in his stage. Most of the time you will be able to react to what Quickman does, and even though his pattern gets shifted by glitching on the far walls, you can still use the knowledge I discussed earlier to predict what he is doing. For example, after a glitched jump, if he throws quick boomerangs in what seems to be the first jump, that's actually the second jump in his order. Quickman is generally easier to avoid if he does high jumps, because it's near impossible to dodge quick boomerangs that he throws at point-blank range. When dodging quick boomerangs on the rebound, try to time your jump so it dodges both the projectiles and gets yourself over Quickman, because he'll be running at you at this point. If he's running into a wall which isn't on the far sides, position yourself to be level with him for easy damage. If you end up behind him as he's running from the center, whale him down. With all this in mind, you'll be training yourself to minimize the damage you take and giving yourself the opportunities to take him down at a quick speed. Weapons. Quickman's primary weakness is Time Stopper. Whereas every other boss will stay frozen by the weapon, Quickman will get frozen and slowly lose health as he's frozen. However, he only loses 14 HP from a full Time Stopper bar, meaning that another weapon will have to be used. His other big weakness is Crash Bomb, which does 4 damage. Although all 7 bombs are enough to kill him, using the multi-hitting explosion can do even more damage if he gets stuck inside it. As far as other weapons, Quickman is weak to a fully charged atomic fire and takes 10 damage from it. And just like the Buster, he takes 2 damage from the air shooter, which can be useful in hitting him as he jumps all around. Lastly, Quickman has a tendency to block projectiles that he is immune against, and extremely rarely the Mega Buster, which will put him in a guard state that stops his current movement. After a short second of guarding, he will start a new pattern of attacks. This could potentially be abused by using something like Metal Blade or Leaf Shield to stop his movement before switching to the Buster or Crash Bomb for a quick hit and repeating. DWN 13, Crashman. 4 damage on contact, 4 damage on Crash Bomb, 4 damage on Crash Bomb Explosion. Crashman is one of the easiest bosses in the game. He simply walks back and forth along the arena, though he turns around just before reaching the wall. If the player shoots, Crashman jumps high with variable speed, in the player's general direction, and launches a Crash Bomb at the player on the way down. The Crash Bomb latches to a surface for half a second before exploding, its radius being small but long-lasting. Crashman can also jump by himself if the player waits too long. If there is already a Crash Bomb on screen, Crashman will not shoot another one until after it disappears. If the player is good at timing their Buster shots, Crashman can be hit up to 4 times in one attack cycle. Buster only. Crashman is similar to Metal Man in that due to his attacks getting triggered by your Buster shots, you can go at your own pace, and when attacking, Crashman should be close to the center as he will jump over you and give you room to walk under him. And while you can just jump and shoot in the air and walk under him for the entire fight, it takes a very long time. Taking him down quickly means you should learn how to deal more damage with each attack cycle. Part of this is taking advantage of the fact that while Crash Bomb is in play, Crashman's next jump will not fire a Crash Bomb as long as the current one is still exploding. So you should aim to shoot him on the way up and when he lands from this jump. That's 3 shots in one cycle, but if Crashman's second jump is getting way too close for comfort, you can hold off on your assault to focus on keeping your distance. Now getting the 4th shot in is a bit trickier. When the crash bomb first lands on the ground, you'll want to very briefly turn around to shoot Crashman as he lands. It's more precise, as you can accidentally walk into this crash bomb, and if you mistime it, Crashman will just jump again. What I've found is that getting in this fourth shot is more plausible if Crashman's attacking jump is less horizontal. That way, the crash bomb isn't hitting the ground at a sharp angle. Weapons. Crashman's weakness is Air Shooter, which does 10 damage. The weapon's nature of going upwards means that Crashman will accidentally jump into the weapon, making it very easy to hit him with it and end the fight quickly. He also takes 6 damage from a fully charged atomic fire, though it is not as effective. DWN-14, Flashman. 4 damage on contact, 2 damage on shots, 0 freeze on Time Stopper. Flashman is one of the easiest bosses in the game. His room is very irregularly shaped and covered in slippery ice-like crystals. Flashman himself spends 5 seconds running at Mega Man in an attempt to collide with him. He tends to walk in one direction, but will short hop in the player's direction if he reaches a wall. He will also short hop and change direction if he is shot, which can slow him down. Once 5 seconds or so are up, Flashman will stop moving and use the Time Stopper, freezing Mega Man in place after the flash for 2 seconds. He will then aim his buster forward and fire, spraying in Mega Man's general direction. His range is limited to covering certain angles, so if the player jumps at the right time, they will be able to dodge his attack. He then goes back to his movement. His rematch arena is completely flat, making the fight much easier. Buster only. Flashman takes 2 damage from the buster, and given his pattern, you can lay in a lot of shots on him to burst damage at a fast rate, much more than what he can do to you. However, I would be lying if I said he wasn't annoying, and I attribute that to the ice physics, irregular layout, and unpredictability of when he uses Time Stopper. Worst case scenario, you get hit just before Time Stopper is activated, and then you get hit again just as it ends. When the fight first begins, head to the middle of the room when shooting him. You want to be positioned mid-screen from Flashman, so you can lay multiple hits in a row and keep him hopping, which not only slows him down but also delays his Time Stopper cooldown. The middle and right side have the highest elevations, which give you the best height. It's easy to jump over Flashman as he comes after you, but give yourself the appropriate space before continuing your assault. Due to the startup of Time Stopper being rather short, it's difficult to react to his animation of flashing, so try your best to anticipate it before jumping up. Even if you do get caught in his crosshairs, there is a low chance where all the shots will fire everywhere except where you are, thanks to the many angles the shots get fired at. Weapons. Flashman's biggest weakness is Metal Blade, which does 4 damage. The weapon also has the perk of juggling him if you're right next to a wall, allowing for an easy victory. Crash Bomb is also a strong weakness, doing 3 damage, but it requires more skilled use. As the bomb itself won't be enough to kill Flashman, it should be placed on a wall, in a way that Flashman will stop time next to it and suffer a lot of damage from the explosion, which is not affected by Time Stopper. Bubble Lead, like the Buster, also does 2 damage. Atomic Fire, if at least half charged, does 6 damage, with the half-charged variant being enough to take him down. Lastly, it should be noted that using Time Stopper on Flashman in the rematch will heal him to full health. DWN-15, Heatman. 8 damage on contact, 4 damage on atomic fire, 8 damage on bodily crash. Heatman is one of the easiest bosses in the game. If left alone, he stands still and can throw a trio of 3 fireballs, this being his variation of the atomic fire, each in slightly different trajectories, and they will temporarily erupt into small flames upon touching the ground. The strength he throws them is based on player proximity. To dodge, the player must do a short hop over the low one at far range, or simply walk away if they are close to Heatman. When Heatman gets hit, he ignites himself in flames, making himself temporarily invincible. After a short time, he will charge forward in an atomic burst, doing a ton of damage. He stops where the player was and returns to normal. The timing of his charge is variable, so it's a matter of reacting to his animation in order to dodge it. Buster only. Heatman takes 2 damage from the Buster, but you won't be able to gun him down as he sets himself up for a bodily crash. Really, the only tricky dodge is at the start, where you will get assaulted by all 3 fireballs at once. As mentioned before, you have to short hop. You want to hit Heatman after he finishes a charge so you can keep the fight going and avoid dodging the fireballs. Even if he does manage to send out fireballs, just walk away from him. After you hit Heatman, you want to position yourself roughly a half screen distance away from him to give yourself ample time to react to his bodily crash. If he keeps doing fast charge attacks and it feels like you're being overwhelmed, there's no shame in just walking away from the fireballs to catch a breather before continuing your assault. Weapons. Heatman is weak to Bubble Lead, which does 6 damage. The weapon's grounded nature will also guarantee hits if aimed in his general direction. Heatman also takes 2 damage from Air Shooter and Quick Boomerang. It should be noted that Heatman will heal himself completely if any type of atomic fire is shot at him when he's idling. He will also get healed completely by Crash Bomb in the same case, though a funny bug can also be found using this weapon. If Crash Bomb is shot at him when he's dashing, the explosion will bug him out and cause him to change directions really quickly until he smacks into a wall, in which case he will eventually return to normal. DWN 16, Woodman. 8 damage on contact, 4 damage on falling leaves, and 8 damage on leaf shield. Woodman is one of the hardest bosses in the game. He first creates a leaf shield around him, which blocks all attacks. During the few seconds he has it on, he throws some leaves into the air. Then, he'll throw the leaf shield forward, which hits really hard and must be avoided by jumping forward. Shortly after, Woodman jumps a short distance towards the player, and the leaves come down from the ceiling, swaying together in a fast motion. Once the leaves disappear, Woodman creates another leaf shield. Although the leaf shield blocks all attacks, Mega Man is able to shoot through the shield if he is close enough that his Buster hand goes past the shield and reaches Woodman. This shooting through shield technique is required to defeat him Buster only without taking damage. Occasionally, Woodman may actually do a higher jump in a way that makes it much easier to run under him, though it's unknown what causes him to do this. Buster only. While Woodman is tough, he can be mastered thanks to the shoot through shield technique. You won't be able to do it right away, as Woodman is too far from you at the start. Jumping over the leaf shield has a specific timing, but it isn't too strict. Pay attention to how Woodman moves and when the leaves start coming down, and you'll eventually get the timing. Once there's no shield in between you two, wail on him in a consistent rhythm. Again, bosses have short iframes, so don't hold back. The leaves fall in the same pattern every time, so knowing where to position yourself before jumping through them helps with dodging. By the time a second leaf shield has been set up, you should be up close to shoot through a shield and continue pumping out damage. If you're too far away, inch a bit closer to make your shots count, and by the time the leaves finish getting thrown upwards, back away so you can dodge the leaf shield. Ultimately, you want to kill Woodman before he throws his 4th leaf shield, so he doesn't corner and squash you. Weapons. Woodman has a lot of weaknesses, arguably the most out of any Robot Master in the series. His biggest weakness is atomic fire. Although it can't pierce his shield, a fully charged attack does 14 damage. His other weakness is Air Shooter, which does 4 damage and can also go through his shield quite easily and do a lot of damage simply through that method alone. As for secondary weaknesses that do 2 damage, you got Metal Blade and Crash Bomb. The former can do a lot of damage thanks to the game's short boss iframes, while the latter can be shot at his shield, causing the explosions to hit Woodman multiple times through the shield. There's also a glitch, where if you pause while Woodman is in the air, he will jump again, causing him to fly. Sort of. You can exploit this with a Metal Blade if you want, but I wouldn't recommend it. Just a cool Easter egg. Lastly, using Leaf Shield on Woodman in the rematch will heal him to full health. First Wily boss, Mecha Dragon. 28 damage on contact, 6 damage on Fireball. The end of the first Wily stage has a large abyss with white blocks being the only way across. However, as the player is jumping across them, the Mecha Dragon will ambush the player from behind and give chase, knocking away any platforms it touches. Mecha Dragon cannot be hurt during this chase, so focus on just running away. Eventually, the player will reach 3 platforms where the real battle begins. Mecha Dragon will fly back and forth along its side of the screen in a loose zigzag pattern, and its weak point is its head. When the player crosses the head's Y level, it attacks by shooting a fireball from its mouth in a slightly slanted upward straight line. Mecha Dragon's movement actually follows the player's movement across the platforms, trying to align with the player as to hit them with the fireballs. If the player stands on one platform for too long, Mecha Dragon will go to the far left and unleash multiple fireballs at once to knock them off. If there are too many objects on screen, the multiple fireballs may not actually hurt the player, but trying to exploit the boss this way is very risky, given how easy it is to get knocked into the pit below. Be very careful as not to let Mecha Dragon touch you, as his touch is an instant death. Buster only. There's a Mega Man 2 exclusive perk that increases your knockback when there's a lot of stuff going on at once, and because there's a huge bottomless pit below you, dodging the fireballs is a necessity. But, like all Fortress bosses in Mega Man 2, Mecha Dragon doesn't have iframes, which means its health can be knocked down very quickly by mashing. Still, you want to get into a rhythm of dodging the fireballs, as any hit could potentially knock you off thanks to that increased knockback. Start off the fight on the middle platform, and when Mecha Dragon starts flying to you, jump to the highest platform. You want to repeat this rhythm of jumping across these 2 platforms, leaving your current platform as Mecha Dragon closes the distance. This gives you good mobility and helps you dodge the fireballs with ease. Of course, you'll want to be shooting him down during these movements to end the fight quickly. Weapons. Mecha Dragon's main weakness is Atomic Fire, with a fully charged shot doing 8 damage. However, this is not enough to single-handedly defeat him, and mainly helps to give you a head start at the beginning of the fight. Quick Boomerang does 1 damage, like with the Mega Buster, but the arc of the weapon makes it very easy to hit Mecha Dragon on the highest platform. Crash Bomb does 1 damage, but there is a very risky strategy to defeat the boss only with this weapon. While shooting it directly at the head won't do much, shooting it at the belly will trigger the explosion. As such, the player should try to manipulate Mecha Dragon's movement so his head moves into the explosion created by shooting the belly, which will deal a lot of damage if timed correctly. However, this method is not recommended for beginners, as it's faster and safer using the other weapons above. Second Wily boss, Pico Pico-kun. 8 damage on contact. The way Pico Pico-kun works is that 2 blocks that are parallel to each other in the room move away from their placement to connect with each other, which forms the little mini-robot, which becomes vulnerable to attack. Once formed, the robot will move in short increments towards the player, temporarily pausing its movements as to readjust. Their speeds are dependent on which one you're fighting. They get faster and faster with each new robot. Pico Pico-kun can form mini-robots not only from the walls, but also from the ceiling and floor, meaning they can emerge right below your feet and surprise you. The only blind spot where they can't emerge from is the very center of the room where you drop in. Pico Pico-kun also summons its mini-robots in a set order every time. Buster only. Each mini-robot takes 3 shots from the Buster to destroy, and since they are treated like enemies, they do not have boss iframes. Each enemy defeated removes 2 HP from the total health bar, for a total of 14 enemies. As I've mentioned, you should be standing in the center of the room before a mini-robot starts forming, and right as you defeat a mini-robot. This way, even if you haven't memorized the order, you'll be setting yourself up to be safe from any ambushes. As the mini-robots start getting faster, you'll want to bait their first movement away from the center, so you can get back to the center and take them down as they pause to readjust. Weapons. The only weapon that can destroy them instantly is Bubble Lead. which may be a bit tricky to use as you have to be very close to the robots to place the bubble on top of them. If this weapon is not suitable, Metal Blade is a great substitute, as it can aim in all directions and hit the mini-robots very easily. Quick Boomerang is also viable to use. Third Wily Boss, Guts Tank. 4 damage on Treads Contact, 4 damage on Body Contact, 4 damage on Fist Contact, 4 damage on Mets, 2 damage on Shots. Guts Tank has giant treads that take up nearly half the screen's width and slowly go left to right along the room. These treads will damage Mega Man if he doesn't move away from them. Guts Tank has 2 different types of firepower to attack the player, but he uses them depending on where the player is. If the player is on the floor, Guts Tank will move its fist up to protect its head, allowing the open gate in its chest to send out Mets, which bounce forward before walking off screen and can be destroyed, though they do not drop health pickups. If the player stands on its treads, Guts Tank will move its fist down to seal its chest gate and begin attacking by shooting lobbing projectiles out of its mouth, which are aligned with the player's position. Guts Tank's only weak point is its eyes, which have to be accessed by getting on the treads. However, since Guts Tank moves its fist down to limit your space and attacks with lobbed projectiles, it can be tricky to stay on the treads. Buster only. You'll want to be standing on the treads at all times, though you won't be able to stand on them until the boss music finishes the intro. Standing on the treads means the fist will always be down and you can shoot the eyes more liberally. The lob shots are pretty easy to avoid if Guts Tank is moving forward, as they don't keep up with the movement. However, you will have to do more tricky maneuvers to evade the shots if Guts Tank is moving backwards. Like the rest of the Wily bosses in Mega Man 2, Guts Tank does not have boss iframes, making it easier to deal quick damage in short bursts. With this in mind, you should aim to get in 2 hits per jump, though only 1 hit is fine if staying on the treads needs to be prioritized. Weapons. Guts Tank's primary weakness is Quick Boomerang, which does 2 damage, is the easiest weapon to rack up damage with, and you can even get in 3 hits per jump. Alternatively, Guts Tank takes 7 damage from a fully charged atomic fire, though it is best saved for future bosses later down the line. Crash Bomb can also be extremely effective, with 2 Crash Bombs defeating it if they are used correctly, but the player has to shoot inside the Guts Tank's mouth at a very specific spot, which will trigger the explosion. This is best done when Guts Tank is moving backwards, so he can take the full damage, but I would suggest holding on to Crash Bomb for this next boss. Fourth Wily Boss, Boob Trap. 4 damage on contact, 4 damage on shots. There are 5 wall drones spread around this room, and multiple breakable walls blocking your paths. All 3 items will be useful for navigating around the room and getting around the breakable walls. Each wall drone will attack simultaneously by firing a fast pink projectile at the player, all at once. This is telegraphed by them flashing together. Other than that, they do not do anything else and remain stationary until they are ready to attack again. They can be destroyed immediately by Crash Bomb, but are immune to every other weapon. Strategy. This boss is infamous because of the strategy needed to defeat it, as the player can only have 7 Crash Bombs at max capacity, and there are 5 wall drones to destroy. There are only 2 breakable walls that have to be broken to access a drone, but most of them don't need to be destroyed, as it's possible to maneuver around them with Item 1, Item 3, and accurate jumps. If you run out of Crash Bomb before you destroy all the drones, the fight is unwinnable and you are forced to die, which sends you back to the checkpoint before the first moving platform, and you must refill the weapon's energy before returning to the boss. It is possible to defeat Boob Trap unscathed, however. To start, you will need to destroy the center drone as soon as possible, so use Item 1 to get to the center platform, switch to Crash once it disappears, do a full jump to destroy the turret, then jump again to dodge the first attack. The next one to destroy is the bottom right one, though as you blow up the walls, dodge the drone attacks by jumping off the small ledge in between the 2 walls. The last drone on the right is next, and you can either drop down from above or place a Crash Bomb in between the 2 walls so it destroys both of them and saves you some time. To get back to the center after destroying both drones on the right, use Item 3 to climb the tall walls. Now that there are only 2 drones left, on the far left, it is possible to save 1 Crash Bomb in your inventory, known as the one crash bomb left trick. The higher drone is very close to a breakable wall that protects the lower drone. If you can jump up to the highest platform with a precise 2-tile jump, just adjacent to the higher one, you will be in position to do the trick. If you miss it and fall all the way down, use item 1 to get up there, and I recommend stacking 2 platforms on top of each other so you can reach the higher platform quicker. Once you're in position, fall down and place a crash bomb in between the drone and the wall so the explosion destroys both of them. The last drone will be available to destroy, and you can save an extra crash bomb for later, which will be very important for the next boss. 5th Wily boss, Wily Machine 2. 10 damage on contact, 6 damage on arc shots, and 6 damage on bounce shots. The Wily Machine 2 always moves side to side in the air, just like the previous machine did. The first phase's weak point is the glass cockpit, and attacks by firing large energy shots from its underside cannon within set intervals. These energy shots move in negative arcs, meaning they first go down, then fly upwards. The arcs are always aligned to target the player, so they have to either jump over the projectiles or walk out of their way. After depleting the first energy gauge, the armored cockpit is damaged, revealing Dr. Wily at the controls. The energy shots this time are now fired in bouncing arcs, moving forward in short hops. The player can walk under them with precise timing, but if multiple balls are lined up together, it's impossible to avoid them all. Buster only. The large energy shots can be very annoying, as they do 6 damage and have a much bigger hitbox than what it seems. For the arc shots, time your jumps right as a projectile is released and you should be able to dodge it. Think of this first phase as like a jump rope where you have to keep a good rhythm, and you should do fine. Alternatively, if you are uncomfortable dodging the orb this way with the Wily Machine 2 being very close to you, you can simply walk left. If you have enough space to walk, the orb will miss you. As for the second phase's bouncing shots, I have no real strategy with this one. The shots grouped together are impossible to dodge and make for the hardest boss to beat, Buster only. But thankfully, a Mega Man 2 exclusive perk gives you longer iframes when there's a lot of stuff going on at once, so you'll survive for longer. Like the rest of the Wily bosses in Mega Man 2, Wily Machine 2 does not have boss iframes, so you should be landing around 2 to 3 shots per jump, though 3 is a bit more skilled. Weapons. The first phase is weak to atomic fire, and takes 14 damage from a fully charged shot. It also helps that you can focus on jump roping as you charge up. If this weapon is unavailable, Metal Blade is a good substitute, as it can hit the boss from the ground. The second phase is weak to Crash Bomb, and takes 4 damage from it. However, if you don't game over, you are not likely to have any Crash Bombs on you thanks to Boobing Trap. But, as I've said earlier, you can make it out of that fight with the one Crash Bomb left trick. When the Wily Machine 2 doubles back from the left side, the Crash Bomb must be aimed directly underneath the cockpit so the explosion goes off and racks up multiple hits on the boss, destroying it with just one shot if the bomb was fired at the correct height. If Crash Bomb can't be used, both Metal Blade and Air Shooter make for good substitutes. Final boss, Alien. 20 damage on contact, 6 damage on shots. Battling the player around the stars of space, Dr. Wily, now turned alien, has a very simple pattern. He will fly around the room in a slow figure 8, and every second or so, he will fire a shot at the player's position. Strategy. The tricky thing with Alien is that he absorbs almost every weapon into full health for him, making him seemingly invincible. However, his only weakness is to Bubble Lead, which does just 1 damage. Given this weapon's unreliability against aerial opponents, the player is forced to close the distance as to drop the bubbles on Alien when he dips low, making sure to avoid his shots and especially not making contact with Alien. Multiple bubbles can be used at once, as Fortress bosses in Mega Man 2 do not have iframes. If the player runs out of Bubble Lead, the fight is unwinnable and they are forced to game over. As the alien shoots within set intervals, you should always keep it in mind like a ticking timer for when you need to dodge it. I like to play aggressive in this fight, With no iframes to stop me, I usually get around 2 to 3 bubbles with each jump, maybe 4 if I'm aligned perfectly. However, if you struggle with damage, focus on staying alive, because although the alien has a very simple pattern, he hits hard and you certainly don't want to die here. With all of the bosses discussed, I've made a couple of tier lists calculated through research. One for Buster only difficulty, one for weapons allowed, and one for my personal opinion on the overall quality of the fights. For the former two, I fought the bosses each 10 times in a row to calculate how much damage I took within those 10 battles, and if there were any ties, I broke the ties by doing more rounds. For weapons, I defaulted to either the weakness or the ones I preferred to use, and I did not break ties. And now for my personal opinion on the fights. Boob Trap. Definitely the most obnoxious boss in the game, forcing you to use up all of your crash bombs just to get through. However, it only really sucks if you die and have to grind again. That and the one crash bomb left trick saved this boss from a lower ranking. Wily Machine 2, Phase 2. High damage balls that are impossible to dodge suck, but I can't ignore the one shot with Crash Bomb. It's so cool as a reward for doing the one Crash Bomb left trick, and I love pulling it off successfully. Airman. He would have been a lot higher if not for his random frame-perfect tornadoes. Getting hit by them in succession is not fun, but thankfully he goes down pretty quickly, and I like shooting him from the back. I like how his weakness obliterates him to make up for dinging against tornadoes. Heatman. The charge attack is good enough to make him stand out, but he's too simple. It really boils down to your reactionary skills, but the high damage of messing up does add that layer of pressure to rack your brain. His weakness is satisfying, given he can't jump. Bubbleman. He's a lot more fun to fight from afar, when you have to slip past both his shots and bubble leads, while also controlling your high water jumps. However, standing within a set distance removes any need to even have water in the first place, as his offense becomes very predictable and exploitable. Wily Machine 2, both phases. Not much different from the previous machine. The first phase is an inverse of before, which is fun, but the second phase really drags it down overall. Despite that, the weaknesses are fun to use. Guts Tank. It has 2 patterns which are really cool to see in tandem, and while balancing on the treads is fun, there's no reason not to be standing on them at all times, effectively removing one of his 2 patterns from play. Flashman. Yeah, he dies super quickly, but I'm honestly fine with that given how easy it is for him to hit you, with the ice physics and layout working in his favor. While the time stopper telegraph is short, it is quite fun to get yourself in position to avoid his shots. And the slim chance of avoiding the shots even in a bad position adds tension to this fight. Weaknesses are fun to pull off as well, especially with setting up Crash Bomb. Wily Machine 2, Phase 1. Thinking of this phase as like a jump rope helps with enjoying it more, given it also puts you in range to shoot him down. Weakness is great for a fight like this as it helps you concentrate. Quickman. Only thing that really sucks is the short hop that throws boomerangs at point blank, which is rough to dodge and drains a lot out of this fight. Despite that, he is undeniably fun to keep up with, even with his pattern getting shifted, and it's always exhilarating to take him down without getting hurt. Weaknesses make sense and are fun to use together. Pico Pico Kun. This is CWU-01P done right, with small robots coming at you from all angles and even getting the drop on you from right below your feet. A telegraph would have been nice given they do a lot of damage, but it isn't a deal breaker given there's a blind spot and they have a set order anyway. Crashman. You could fight him very slowly and win every time, but trying to burst up to 4 damage with each pass is where he really shines, though he dies super quickly to his weakness. Mecha Dragon. I don't know about y'all, but this chase sequence was really cool seeing it for the first time. It's a great subversion of expectations. Although it's very easy to die in the actual fight, you can defeat this boss just as quickly and reliably. Woodman. The shooting through shield technique really adds to this boss, tasking you to defeat him as quickly as possible while still timing your dodges correctly. Although his attacks are precise to avoid, they remain consistent, and short boss iframes have never felt as good as they are in this fight. Him having lots of weaknesses is great, especially when all of them interact with the boss differently. Metal Man. He actually manages to incorporate conveyor belts into a boss fight in a fresh way. It adds the right amount of difficulty to supplement his pattern, and keeps the metal blade dodging dynamic, no matter how you fight him. Just like with Woodman, comboing shots together feels really good, and it's something you can only pull off in Mega Man 2. Weaknesses are well designed, especially his self-weakness just being hilarious. Alien. This boss has a really good concept and build-up, thanks to subverting expectations once again after you beat the Wily Machine 2. And for a guy who only takes damage to one weapon, Bubblehead was the best choice for a final boss. The pattern is very simple, but still allows for skillful usage of the bubbles to take him down quickly, and the reveal of the alien just being a prank hologram helps with making sense out of everything in a humorous way. Compared to Mega Man 1, the bosses of this roster are more interesting and fast-paced, which leads to a bigger quantity of higher placements that I get a kick out of every time I revisit this game. However, there's still a few stinkers that balance it out, either from unavoidable damage, poor design, or being too exploitable. So all around, the roster here is pretty okay. And that's the end of this video. If you like what you saw, consider giving a like and subscribe to my channel. As per usual, check the links in the description if you want more out of my channel. I hope this guide will prove useful in helping folks get better at the game. As far as my next project, I'll be returning to the Castlevania franchise with Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest. With that said, I'll be signing off. Take care, folks.